One of the most difficult things for people to do is to accept criticism. Don't worry, you don't need to turn the camera off. I'm not about to start criticizing you. Picture the following scenario. A group of people are standing around having a good old chat about life, the universe and everything, when, as things often do, the conversation starts to develop until eventually they find themselves talking lashon hara, talking bad about other people. Now, one of the guys there is uncomfortable with the situation, and he turns to his friends and he says nicely and kindly, guys, I think we should stop what we're talking about now. It seems like we're talking lashon hara. How do you think his friends are going to react? In the best instance, his friends might actually say, you're right, thanks for pointing it out, and they'll change the conversation to talk about something else. But sadly, that's not always the case. Another reaction is to turn around and actually berate the fellow who tried to do good and tell him, who do you think you are to tell me what to do? It's none of your business. And yet a third reaction, which is perhaps the most common, is often the worst of all. And that's when a person turns around and says, this isn't lashon hara, we're not doing anything wrong, I know the laws of lashon hara better than you, you won't tell me that it's lashon hara because it certainly isn't. Why do I say that's the worst? Because how can a person ever grow, how can a person ever change if they're not willing to accept that they might have done something wrong in the first place? Listen to this powerful idea from the Dubna Maggid. In this week's Sedra, Moshe Rabbeinu sends the Meraglim, he sends the 12 spies to Israel to look at the land and decide how the Jewish people should best conquer the land. Now he turns to Yoshua, his faithful disciple, and he adds on a letter to his name. Previously, Yoshua had been called Hoshea. Now Moshe adds a Yud. And adding a Yud, he indicates that Ka Yoshiachom Me'atzas Meraglim, may God save you from the counsel of the Meraglim. If the spies go about saying a bad report about the land, may God save you, and you come back and say something better. What happened? Moshe's tefillah was successful, and indeed Yoshua was one of the only 2 of the 12 who didn't come back and say lashon hara and say evil gossip about Israel. So the question then is, why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu pray for everyone? If he had davened for all 12 of them, then maybe all 12 of them wouldn't have said a bad report. Says the Dubna Maggid, listen to this. There's 2 kinds of averos that a person might do. Sometimes people sin and they know it's a sin, but worst of all is when people sin and they imagine that they're doing a mitzvah. They justify that they're actually doing a positive good deed. Now Yoshua had a tremendous bias when it came to going to spy out the land. If you recall, in the previous week's parsha, in Parshas Ba'aloischa, a prophecy had been foretold, telling of Moshe's death before they would enter the land, and that Yoshua, his servant, would bring the Jewish people into the land. Yoshua didn't want this. Yoshua was a humble man who wanted to see his leader continue on his mission to bring the people all the way into the land, and he certainly didn't want the power for himself. So when Yoshua went to spy out the land, he may have had one motive in his mind. How can we stall this mission? How can I ensure that Moshe Rabbeinu will stay alive longer and I won't be the leader? In order to do that, Yoshua may have justified saying a bad report. He may have assumed that if we say bad about the land, we'll stay longer in the desert. So Yoshua had a very powerful, positive justification that may have provoked him to actually say a bad report about the land of Israel. And it's that Moshe Rabbeinu was totally afraid of. He wanted Yoshua to do what was right, and he didn't want Yoshua to come with any kind of justification, even and certainly not one that makes it seem to be a mitzvah in the best interest of everyone to do something bad. We're all human and we all naturally have a bias to want to justify the things we do. But let's start with an honesty about our own actions, being able to reflect on things, to consider the things we've done and determine whether indeed they were right or wrong. And then from there on we'll be able to grow and become better people.